Hello friends, my name is Marines, and today we're talking about my most anticipated books releasing in 2025. I've separated this into three categories. The first is my real most anticipated. These are books that are primarily from authors I know and love, authors that I am invested in, and there's a certain amount of confidence there that I have loved their work before, so I'm anticipating their upcoming work. My second category is books that sound good, or books that I'm attracted to for a number of reasons that aren't necessarily that I have read these authors and enjoyed them before. That's why they're not quite my most anticipated. They're ones that I'm hopeful for, so they're kind of in that middle category. And then the third category is books that I am looking forward to reading, but maybe not entirely in a positive way. They are books that I am curious about, books that I know will be popular, books that I know other people are highly anticipating, so they will be sort of in the public discourse, lots of people reading and talking about them. I love reading things that are popular and being part of the conversation. These are books that I am anticipating, that are on my radar, but that I am going into a little more like, let's wait and see. I'll be the judge of that. Okay, so first let's start with my most anticipated. First up, we have Death of the Author by Nnedi Okarofor, and this is releasing on January 14th, 2025. Death of the Author is an adult sci-fi about a disabled writer who manages to turn her life completely around by writing and creating this sci-fi novel, and this novel does really well, only to find that the lines between fiction and reality are becoming very dangerously blurred. I've read both Binti and Akata Witch by Okarofor. I do have to catch up on both of those series, but I really enjoy the speculative aspects to her works, and I love things that are meta and that have like commentary, writers writing about writing and writers writing about art, and I think that this has potential for that. I mean, calling it Death of the Author is already very tongue-in-cheek, and I can't wait to see like the commentary about writing and about publishing that will be baked into this as well. Next, We Lived on the Horizon by Erika Swyler. This is coming out January 14th, 2025, and it is another adult science fiction story, and it is set in a walled city that is built to preserve humanity after an apocalyptic event. We follow a bioprosthetic surgeon and her AI creation as they are uncovering a conspiracy that involves murder, memory erasure, and a brewing war between the elite and the oppressed. I can't recall where I talked about this. It might have been over on my bind read, as like we've been talking about like the things that I'm acquiring and the manuscripts that I'm going through, and I like half predicted that we were going to see like an increase in AI stories, and it is something that I am interested in. I think especially because like the flavor of AI stories that we've gotten previous to this point, I'm very curious, as we have seen AI progress like in real life out of sci-fi, if that will have any sort of influence on how we see AI stories moving forward. That was just a total sidebar about how I feel like we're going to continue to get more and more AI stories, and I, for one, I'm very interested to see where it goes. But this is on my list because I loved Light from Other Stars by Erika Swyler. This is a story about a family, a mom, a dad, and their daughter, and the father is obsessed with preserving his daughter's childhood, so much so that he alters the fabric of time. And so we're following those events in the past, and then we're also following the daughter Nada in the future when she has achieved her dream of becoming an astronaut. I think that this did such a wonderful job letting the themes speak through its speculative elements. This was such a beautiful exploration of grief and of like complicated relationships. I think about this book a lot. It's been several years since I read it. This is one of those books that I will need to reread, but has the potential to become a favorite of all time for me if it holds up, because it just lives so strongly in my memory. And I've been looking forward to whatever Swyler does next. So this like combination of like a premise that sounds interesting, themes that seem right up my alley, and an author that I know I've already loved before. Yes. Next up, we have The Antidote by Russel, which is coming out March 11th, 2025. And this is an adult historical fantasy set during the Dust Bowl. It follows a witch who stores memories in her body, a cursed farmer, and a time-traveling photographer as they confront buried secrets and supernatural forces in a dying Nebraskan town. I really enjoy Russel's writing. Orange World is a collection of her short stories, and I've read one other collection of her short stories. And I think she has such a way of taking things that seem really, really familiar and really relatable, and then just kind of spinning them to make it very odd, very strange, and very weird. And that combination of those two things leaves me feeling unbalanced. I think her stories are made weirder for how their entry points are often very relatable. This is one of those authors that I would love to just peek inside her head to know what goes on in Karen Russell's head. I cannot do that, so instead I will just keep reading whatever she puts out. Next up, we have A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett, and this is coming out April 1st. This is the second book in the Shadow of the Leviathan series. The Tainted Cup was the first book, and I read that this year, and I really enjoyed it. I went into it kind of middling because I had tried a different series by Robert Jackson Bennett, and it was like a 3-star experience, but I really liked The Tainted Cup. I think I especially liked the dynamic between the two main characters. I'm not totally like a Sherlock Watson type of girly, but I liked that sort of dynamic in this book. So the second book follows these two same characters as they have to solve a new crime. Next, we have Sky Daddy by Kate Folk, and this is coming out April 8th. Sky Daddy is an adult literary fiction about a woman who has a secret attraction to airplanes. And she believes it is her destiny to marry an airplane, and the only way that she can do that is to die in a crash. Her life starts to spiral out of control as her obsession collides with her work life and her reality, and she has to decide whether to keep up the pretenses of a normal life or throw herself into her obsession. That premise alone, delicious. The title, Sky Daddy, as the title for this premise. But also, I read Out There by Kate Folk, which is also a collection of weird short stories, and I really enjoyed it. There are a couple of stories in here that haunt me, truly. I feel very similarly about Kate Folk as I do Karen Russell, actually. Now, having these two paired together, talking about both of their collections of short stories, I really enjoy them both in similar ways, where they've got these kooky ideas, but they write them with so much care, thematic care, and so much insight to the human experience. Next up, we have Meet Me at the Crossroads by Megan Giddings, which is coming out June 25th. This is speculative fiction about twin sisters who discover these mysterious doors that open to another dimension. This forces them to confront their own bond, their beliefs, and of course the dangers lurking on the other side of the door. I read Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This is another speculative novel about a young Black girl who takes a job that seems too good to be true, but she does it because she needs the money, it has benefits, and what she walks into is basically medical experimentation. This was so trippy. You didn't really know what was true, what was false. You were experiencing it the same way that our main character was. Of course, there was a lot of commentary about medical experimentation on brown and Black bodies, and just this question of who would do that? I also have her second novel, The Woman Could Fly, as an audiobook, and I would like to finish that this year before next year, since she has a third book coming out. So hold me to that. There are a lot of really trippy sci-fi speculative things on here, and honestly that has been my vibe and my mood. It is also very in the wheelhouse of what I'm looking for my imprint, so yes. Okay, speaking of my imprint, you guys have heard me talk about this one already, but this is The Unmapping by Denise S. Robbins. This is literary sci-fi about an unexplained geographical natural disaster in which cities start rearranging themselves. There had been rumors of this happening in other places, but one night it happens in New York City, and both of our main characters work for New York City's emergency management department, so they are having to deal with all of the things that would happen if people became lost within their own cities, if power grids snapped, if buildings were upended. This has brief glimpses into other points of view. It is very much a tapestry, a very introspective look at how humans react to chaos all along the spectrum, from the people who want to be heroes, from the people who want to escape and never be found, to the ones who would start a cult or join a cult. The release date for this book has been updated. It was end of June, but this is now going to be available June 3rd, 2025, and I hope that you will pick it up. Next up, we have The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. If Silvia Moreno-Garcia has a novel coming out, it is going on my most anticipated. I say that and I haven't read her most recent one. It's not that bad. It hasn't been out for that long, but this is another book that I would like to get to before the end of the year. The Bewitching is one of her adult horror. It spans 3 eras and we follow a graduate student, a witch-fearing great-grandmother, and a mysterious 1930s novelist. And they are all connected by the same dark force that is threatening their lives, their history, and the halls of a haunted university. I love Moreno-Garcia. I could rank all of her works from my own personal favorites to least favorites, and I tend to enjoy her fantasy more than her horror. I'm not a very big horror reader, but even the ones that are like the weakest to me are like strong books still. And I just love that she flip-flops between genres. I love to see things that are like well-worn, given new life by people of color. It is my jam, and she does it so well. She writes so well. Her writing is always very atmospheric. So yes, if she writes it, I will read it. Next, we've got Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher, and this is coming out August 19th. This is an adult fantasy that is a reimagining of Snow White, wherein a healer races to save a poisoned princess, all while uncovering like dark secrets about the magic mirror world and the rising evil queen. I've been slowly like reading more and more T. Kingfisher. I loved Swordheart. I loved Nettle and Bone. This year I read The Clockwork Boys and The Wonder Engine, which even though weirdly like split in two, I loved the characters in this, and there's just so much about how Kingfisher writes her characters and incorporates her fantastical world and aspects that just works for me. I will continue digging into her backlist, and this Snow White reimagining where you've got like the poisoned princess and the healer, love that. Next, The Possession of Alba Diaz by Isabel Cana, and this is coming out August 19th. This is an adult gothic horror set in 18th century Mexico, where our main character is plagued by demonic possession in an isolated silver mine. And she must rely on a man with his own troubled past in order to confront this entity that is threatening her life and her sanity. Now, you know, this one is on here with a little bit of a question mark. I read Vampires of El Norte and I loved it. Genuinely, if I were to put together a list of specific criticisms that I cannot stand to hear, it is criticism of this book saying this says Vampires of El Norte and there's not enough vampires in it. That drives me absolutely bonkers. I mean, I understand like the book not being the specific balance of things that you wanted, but this Vampires is not referring to vampire. It even tells you of El Norte. Anyways, another sidebar. The thing about this that I really enjoyed was actually that balance, the way that like the horror aspect was more metaphorical, it more presented like an outside challenge where you had like the main characters and their relationship really taking the emotional core of the story. It was very back and forth. There was some miscommunication, both of the kind where they weren't willing to sort of change their minds and listen, but there were also outside forces sort of enacting upon their miscommunication, which helped balance it to me, where I felt like, okay, I understand why these two people keep missing each other if like people are like pushing them in that direction. I loved the main characters. I was rooting for them. And every once in a while we would get like that outside force of like the colonizers and the creatures. I loved this balance of things, and I'm very excited to continue to read from Cana. The reason that this is like on here, question mark, is because we've talked a couple times now how I'm not much of a horror reader. I am a big baby. I get scared very easily. Like it has to be very specific horror for me to do. And my one big like no thank you is like demon possession. I cannot do it. I get so scared. I hate to read about anything demon possession-y. I get so scared. I really want to read. So I'm putting this on here. Mostly I'm letting you know that this is happening, that I'm interested in. I'm not promising that I will be brave enough to read it, but I'll keep my eye on it, and I'll also listen for reviews. Maybe get some people in my Discord to read it first and report back, but it's on my list. I ordered these by release date, so this is like pure coincidence that the next thing I'm going to talk about is Queen Demon by Martha Wells, which is coming out October 7th. This is the second book in the Rising World series. In the first book, Kai, who is the Witch King, wakes up imprisoned after he's been murdered, so he has to figure out why. The second book picks up where we left off, so I can't say too much about it, but we're following the same group of people as they are looking for a fabled source of magic and power. I've really enjoyed The Witch King. It was really interesting because it's a little bit of a slow build. It is very like hefty in its world building, and it took me a couple of false starts before I felt like I was like situated in the story and in the world building. But I think because it built so slowly and I was immediately invested in the characters, I left off thinking I want so many more books from this world and from these characters. And so I'm really excited to like have that basis and continue to build. I love Kai. I love Kai so much. I love Kai so much. Next up, we have the second book that my imprint is publishing next year, and that is Orange Wine by Esperanza Hope Snyder. Right now, we are aiming for a September 30th publication date. I have seen the cover. It is so good. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. Orange Wine is set in early 20th century Colombia. We follow a woman named Inés who gets into a marriage against the advice of her family and her sisters, and we see that marriage very quickly fall apart. And so then this becomes a story of Inés sort of like rediscovering her life, her love of art, falling in love again, the complicated relationship she has with her sisters because of all of this, the complicated relation she has with religion and faith because of all of this. It is poetic and very beautiful. It reminded me a lot of the stories of like the older generations in my own family. Okay, so next up we have the second tier of books that sound good, that is not like quite my most anticipated, but I'm keeping an eye out for these as well. First, we have Blackwood's Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey, which is coming out February 24th. I read one book by Eowyn Ivey years ago, The Snow Child, and I really remember enjoying it, but I never read it again, and I don't have super strong memories of my experience with the book. It's just kind of like filed away of like, yeah, I read that, I liked it. So that's why I didn't quite make it up to most anticipated. So this one is adult literary fantasy, and it is a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast. This one is also set in Alaska. I remember that now. Snow Child was set in Alaska, was also very, very atmospheric. This one is about a struggling single mother in Atlanta who falls in love with a reclusive man and his untamed wilderness, only to discover the harsh realities of their isolated life together. Next, we have The River Hat's Roots by Amal el-Mohtar, and this is out March 4th. I've not read This Is How You Lose a Time War. I tried it and I DNF'd it, and I always tell myself I will go back, and maybe I will, but I'm very excited about a standalone work from this author. It is a fantasy about two sisters who tend to enchanted willows on the edge of fairy, but their bond and their lives are threatened when one of the sisters chooses a forbidden love from a magical realm. Next, we have The Incandescent by Emily Tesh, and this is coming out May 13th. I've not read Some Desperate Glory yet. I didn't do my Hugo's reading project this year. I intended to, but I was just in such a bad reading slump, so I haven't read Some Desperate Glory yet. Another one that I want to finish before the end of the year. So I don't know if I like this author or not. I have a feeling I will really appreciate Some Desperate Glory, considering how a lot of the people who read it in my Discord talked about it. But I've added The Incandescent onto my list because of the description. It is dark academia, which I do struggle with. This is a magical school. It follows a powerful magician who is the director of the School of Magic, and she must protect her students from these attacks, all while she is also protecting and confronting a dangerous truth. Next, we have Awake in the Floating City by Susanna Kwan, and this is also coming out May 13th. I put this on this list based solely on the description of the book. I know nothing about this author, if they have written before or not, but this is an adult literary sci-fi, which, you know, music to my ears, and it is set in a flooded San Francisco where a grieving artist forms a deep bond with a 130-year-old woman and learns to reconnect with life and art art while documenting their vanishing world. That sounds like such my jam. Post-apocalyptic, but introspective, thinking about life and art. All right, that brings us to our final chunk here, and these are just books that I'm curious to try. Number one, we have Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reed. I read A Study in Drowning this year and I hated it. Maybe hate is a strong word. I think I really didn't like it, and that compounded with how much people love Ava Reed's work. Like really, like intellectually, I know everybody can like what they like. I know. In my heart, I was so frustrated because of the type of dislike that I had for this work, and it's made me really curious about the rest of Reed's work to see if it was like just this one story, or is there like casual bigotry in all of her stories, or like what is going on exactly. I like would love to follow the pattern of her main female characters, of their relationship with their bodies and how that is portrayed through the story. Like there are a lot of different pieces that just felt really off to me in A Study in Drowning, and now I'm like, I need more data. So Fable for the End of the World is on that list. This is almost an insult to this next author, but I put Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins on this Curiosities list. I know. I love The Hunger Games, and I will defend The Hunger Games all day long. I hated Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And in fact, it was a kind of thing that I think cheapened a few aspects of the Hunger Games trilogy to me. And so like the idea that we're continuing to do this is really like, I don't know, I'm worried. Everybody gives Collins a lot of credit of like, she wouldn't do this if she didn't have something to say. I don't think she had much, if anything, to say in Ballad. And so like, I'm very, very nervous about this continuing on, but also I'm not gonna read it. Of course I'm gonna read it. So it's on my Curiosities list. Next is like a similar thing. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I've really enjoyed Emily Henry's romances. On a scale, I have my favorites and least favorites, but generally I enjoy what she's doing. But I haven't read Funny Story. I feel like her books come out and I'm never like running to pick up the next one. It's like, oh, I have to read it. But when I'm in the mood, I will pick it up and I will enjoy it. But I have to be in the mood for an Emily Henry. So that's why I didn't want to put this on my most anticipated, because I know it's going to come out. I probably won't rush to read it. Like I'm fine just letting it be and turning to it when I need it. So it's just kind of hanging out on this list. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is another author where there are certain things that like translate across their works that I don't love, including the way that they treat their female characters, the like shallowness of the world, but the way that we spend so much time sort of looking at the scenery and the plot kind of spinning its wheels or going nowhere or being solved really easily and things along those lines. I always love Schwab's premises and I'm like, that sounds amazing. And then I go in and it's like, what are we doing? And this is another one. It's like vampires and girl power. And I'm like, that sounds amazing, but it's V.E. Schwab, so I don't know if I'm gonna love it, but I do know that I'm gonna try it. Similarly, The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I tried One Dark Window this year because everybody was raving about it, and I also really didn't like it. In very similar ways to the way that I didn't like A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. The writing felt really overworked, and the plot felt underbaked and the world felt underbaked, and I just had a lot of questions that nobody was answering, and we were just going on and on and on. Even though I had that bad experience, this is another one that I feel like a lot of people will be reading and talking about and looking forward to, and I'm interested to see if the author can grow. And the next and the final one it's just a straight, I'm a curious gal. What can I say? North is the Night by Emily Rath. Emily Rath is the author of the hockey romance that I read for you all. To this day, one of the worst things I've ever read in my entire life. And whenever I think about any single plot point in that book, I just start cracking up because nothing makes sense. It is all awful. It is terrible. Emily Rath of hockey romance fame is writing a fantasy, and I gotta see it. What can I say? I gotta see it. I gotta see it. If you are interested in what my imprint is releasing, we are currently in the process of looking for our third acquisition, which will be released spring 2026. And you can get all of the behind the scenes of that process, see me reading manuscripts and sharing with you what I'm thinking, having you guys vote on what sounds the most interesting to you until we narrow it all down and pick my third acquisition. It's really a fun time, if I do say so myself. That is with a membership of $5 a month. I know not everybody can support that way, but if you can just take 15 seconds to follow me on Mareas, it's completely free. I'm doing what I was doing on Substack through my bindery, so you'd be like signing up for my newsletter. If I could just get 10% of you who are here to go sign up for my newsletter, like, hello, mind-blowing. If I could get 5% of you who had $5 a month, that's like less than a cup of coffee where I am, to sign up for my membership and support my work, that would be life-changing. Okay, pitch over. That's it for me today. If I've mentioned any books that you are also anticipating, let me know in the comments. If there's anything that you're anticipating that I did not mention, let me know. Maybe I missed some things. I'm not saying it and I'm not committing to anything, but it is December 1st and this is a video. And tomorrow's December 2nd and I do have a video planned. So if that sounds suspiciously to you like the start of Vlogmas, might I remind you that I really suck at posting consistently, but I do like to try. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. This is the a drop of corruption. What is this? I really should have grabbed these all before I started recording. That would have been smart. That would have been smart. Is it a young adult speculative novel? Is it, I wrote that. Is it true?